Perspecticide. It is the psychological equivalent of identity theft, but instead of stealing your credit card, they steal your mind. The term literally translates to the killing of perspective, and it describes the total eradication of your worldview, your opinions, and your beliefs, which are systematically replaced by theirs. It goes deeper than gaslighting. While gaslighting makes you doubt what is real, perspecticide makes you forget who you are. It happens so gradually that you don't notice you are disappearing. You stop listening to your favorite music because they mock it. You stop seeing your family because they criticize them. You change your political views, your religious beliefs, and even your daily routine to align perfectly with theirs, not because you were logically convinced, but because maintaining your own separate identity became too dangerous. The process is often compared to brainwashing in cults. The manipulator creates a sterile environment where independent thought is punished and conformity is rewarded. Every time you express a unique preference or an opposing thought, you are met with scorn, anger, or hours of circular arguments. To survive, you learn to suppress your own internal voice. You start to police your own thoughts before they even leave your mouth. You reach a point where you cannot answer a simple question like, "What do you want for dinner?" without first scanning their face to see what they want you to want. The ultimate tragedy of this tactic is that you become an avatar for the abuser. You become a vessel that holds their opinions, their grudges, and their desires. You might find yourself repeating phrases they use, hating people you've never met because they hate them, and defending actions you previously would have found abhorrent. You are physically alive, walking and talking, but the distinct, vibrant person you were before the relationship has been effectively erased, leaving behind a hollow shell that exists solely to reflect the abuse. Sealioning. This starts with a seemingly innocent, polite question, often from a stranger or an acquaintance who has inserted themselves into a conversation uninvited. They ask, "Can you please provide a source for that claim?" Or, "I'm just trying to understand your perspective. Can you explain why you feel that way?" On the surface, this looks like a genuine attempt at civil discourse or a request for education. However, this is not curiosity. It is a form of relentless, bad faith harassment masquerading as a rational debate. Sea lining is a trolling tactic where an aggressor pursues a target with persistent, repetitive requests for evidence and clarification, refusing to take no for an answer, all while maintaining a facade of extreme politeness and sincerity. The trap lies in the imbalance of effort. The Sealian demands that you perform exhaustive emotional and intellectual labor, digging up citations, writing detailed explanations, or justifying your lived experiences, while they simply sit back and say, "I'm still not convinced. Can you explain this part?" If you engage, they immediately move the goalposts or nitpick your sources, ensuring that the conversation never ends. If you refuse to engage or tell them to do their own research, they switch to a tone of wounded innocence. They will say, "I was just asking a civil question. There is no need to be rude." Or, "I guess you can't back up your arguments if you're getting this defensive." This tactic is designed to provoke an emotional reaction that destroys your credibility. The aggressor remains performatively calm, cool, and collected, while you, exhausted and frustrated by their incessant badgering, eventually snap. The moment you show anger or annoyance, they win. They point to your emotional response as proof that you are the unreasonable one, effectively painting themselves as the victim of your hysteria. It is a psychological denial of service attack intended to waste your time, drain your energy, and silence you by making the cost of speaking your mind too high to sustain. They are not looking for answers. They are looking to exhaust you until you give up and leave the space entirely. Toxic amnesia. You bring up a specific, painful memory, perhaps the night they screamed at you until you cried, or the promise they made to pay you back. You remember the clothes you were wearing, the time on the clock, and the exact sting of their words. Yet, they look at you with a blank, innocent stare and say, "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. That never happened." Toxic amnesia is a form of gaslighting where the manipulator pretends to have completely forgotten their abusive behavior or broken promises. It is the strategic use of convenient forgetfulness to evade accountability and rewrite history in real time. This is not a medical condition, it is a psychological eraser. By claiming they don't remember, they instantly shut down any possibility of resolution. You cannot hold someone accountable for an event they insist does not exist. It forces you into a maddening corner. To continue the conversation, you first have to prove that reality actually occurred. You find yourself frantically reciting details, pulling up old texts, and acting out the scene, only to be met with a shrug and a patronizing label. You are imagining things, or "You really hold on to grudges, don't you? I don't even remember that." The brilliance of this cruelty is that it positions you as the aggressor. Because they don't remember the abuse, your attempt to discuss it looks, to them, like you are bringing up drama out of thin air to start a fight. They act confused and hurt by your accusations, leaving you feeling guilty for attacking a person who claims to be innocent. Over time, this erodes your trust in your own mind. You stop bringing up grievances because you know they will just dissolve into the fog of their denial. You are left alone with the heavy burden of the truth while they sleep soundly, unburdened by a conscience because they have deleted the files of their own cruelty. Cryptic communication, a status update that reads, "Some people never learn," with no context. A text message at 10 a.m. that simply says, "We need to talk," followed by 6 hours of radio silence. A heavy sigh in the middle of a quiet room, and when you ask what is wrong, the answer is a clipped, "Nothing. Don't worry about it." This is cryptic communication, the deliberate use of ambiguity, vagueness, and silence to provoke anxiety and insecurity. It is a psychological trap designed to force you into a state of hypervigilance where you are compelled to become a detective in your own relationship. The power of this tactic lies in the information gap. By withholding the full story or the clear intent, the manipulator forces you to fill in the blanks with your own fears. You spend hours analyzing a 3-word text, dissecting their tone, and replaying your last 10 conversations to figure out what you might have done wrong. They drop hints, use passive-aggressive subtweets, or speak in riddles like, "I just find it funny how things work out," refusing to clarify who or what they are talking about. They rely on the fact that the human brain hates uncertainty and will work overtime to resolve it. The result is a massive power imbalance. The person holding the secret holds the control. While you are spiraling in a panic, trying to solve the puzzle of their mood, they are sitting back, watching you squirm. It allows them to punish you without ever explicitly being aggressive. If you confront them, they can easily gaslight you. "You're paranoid. That status wasn't about you." Or, "I was just busy. Why did you freak out over a text?" They accuse you of reading too much into things, even though they deliberately wrote the script in a code that was impossible to read, ensuring that you remain off balance and desperate for their validation to settle your nerves. Overjustification, This tactic transforms a simple decision into a courtroom trial where you are the defendant, the manipulator is the judge, and your personal boundaries are the crime. Overjustification is the toxic dynamic where no is never accepted as a complete sentence. In a healthy relationship, you can simply say, "I don't want to go out tonight," or "I don't like that movie," and that preference is respected. But in a manipulative dynamic, every preference, feeling, or boundary you set is met with a relentless why. This why is not a request for information. It is a challenge to your authority. They demand that you provide evidence, logic, and valid reasons for your feelings. If you say you are tired, they argue that you slept 8 hours, so you can't be tired. If you say you are hurt by a joke, they demand you explain exactly what was hurtful about it, only to dismantle your explanation point by point. You find yourself presenting a closing argument just to justify your right to have a basic human emotion. You dig up old examples, you cite articles, and you plead your case, desperate to make them understand your perspective. The trap is that they are not listening to understand, they are listening to argue. By forcing you to over-justify, they shift the power. If you give them a reason, "I can't go because I have no money," they solve the reason, "I'll pay." Now you are trapped because you justified your no with a specific obstacle, and they remove the obstacle. You are forced to say yes or look unreasonable. This teaches you a brutal lesson. Do not express needs, because the energy required to defend them is greater than the pain of just submitting to what they want. You stop acting on your intuition and start living your life prepared for a cross-examination that never ends. Moral licensing. It creates a dynamic where kindness is not a gift, but a currency used to purchase immunity for future cruelty. This psychological mechanism turns a relationship into a transactional balance sheet, where every act of decency is strictly recorded, not out of love, but to create a moral credit they can spend later when they want to mistreat you. The trap springs when you try to hold them accountable for bad behavior. You confront them about coming home late, speaking to you with disrespect, or breaking a promise. Instead of acknowledging the mistake, they immediately pivot to a good deed they performed recently. They remind you that they worked overtime last week, or that they bought you that expensive gift, or that they let you go out with your friends without complaining. The logic is twisted, but devastatingly effective. I did X good thing yesterday, so I have earned the license to do Y bad thing today. They use their past positive actions as a shield to deflect current accountability, effectively arguing that their good deeds cancel out their abuse. It is a way of saying, "I am a good person on paper, so you have no right to complain about how I treat you in practice." This tactic is particularly insidious because it targets your sense of gratitude and fairness. You start to feel guilty for bringing up issues, wondering if you are being demanding or ungrateful, considering all they do for you. You begin to view their basic participation in the relationship, things like paying bills or being faithful, as heroic acts that you must repay with your silence. The manipulator uses this to maintain a pristine self-image. They don't see themselves as abusive because they focus entirely on the credits in their mental bank account, completely ignoring the massive withdrawals they are making at your expense. Eventually, you stop asking for respect because you feel you cannot afford the price they charge for it, leaving you trapped in a debt that was never yours to pay. Dog whistling. It happens in a crowded room, perhaps at a dinner party or a family gathering, where everyone is laughing and the atmosphere is warm. The person you are afraid of smiles charmingly at the group and says something that sounds completely harmless to everyone else. A casual comment like, "Oh, you know how Jennifer gets when she's had too much sugar," or "Make sure you double check the lock. We don't want a repeat of last summer." The guests nod, unbothered, perhaps even chuckling at what appears to be a light-hearted inside joke. But you freeze. Your blood runs cold. Your heart hammers against your ribs, and your stomach drops. You know exactly what they mean. This is dog whistling, the use of coded language that appears normal to the general public, but carries a specific, often threatening frequency that only the intended target can hear. Just as a high-frequency whistle is audible to a dog but silent to a human, these comments are designed to bypass the social radar of the people around you while delivering a direct psychological blow to you. That comment about sugar wasn't a joke. It was a reference to a humiliating argument you had yesterday where they accused you of having no self-control. The comment about the lock wasn't a safety tip. It was a reminder of a past mistake they have never let you forget. A subtle threat that they are watching your every move. The genius of this cruelty is its plausible deniability. If you react, if you get upset, cry, or snap back, you look like the crazy one. The abuser can simply throw their hands up and say to the room, "I was just reminding her to be safe. I don't know why she's being so sensitive." They weaponize the audience's ignorance against you. You cannot explain why the comment was hurtful without sounding paranoid or airing dirty laundry, which is exactly what they want. They have successfully abused you right in front of witnesses, and instead of getting caught, they have tricked the witnesses into viewing you as the unstable one. This tactic creates a suffocating sense of isolation. You are being bullied in plain sight, yet you are the only one who can see it. It forces you to suppress your natural emotional reactions to avoid making a scene, which causes you to internalize the abuse. You sit there, smiling tightly, swallowing the humiliation, knowing that they are enjoying the power trip of controlling your emotional state without ever lifting a finger or raising their voice. It is the perfect crime of emotional violence, an attack that leaves no bruises and has no witnesses, even in a room full of people. Weaponized incompetence. It starts with a simple request for help that seemingly goes well. You ask them to handle a basic adult responsibility, loading the dishwasher, mailing a package, or watching the kids for an hour. They don't refuse. In fact, they agree cheerfully. It looks like teamwork. You relax, believing you have a partner who shares the load. But when you return to check on the task, it is a catastrophe. The dishes are jammed in randomly and still dirty. The package was sent to the wrong address. The kids are unsupervised while they stare at a screen. When you point out the mistake, thinking it was an honest error, they weaponize their own helplessness. They look at you with wide, innocent eyes and say, "I'm just not good at this stuff like you are," or "I tried my best. Why are you always criticizing me?" Suddenly, you are the villain. You feel guilty for getting angry at someone who tried. Frustrated and exhausted, you sigh, step in, and fix the mess yourself because it is faster than teaching them. The next time a chore needs doing, you don't even ask. You simply do it yourself to avoid the stress of managing their failure. This is the trap. They have successfully trained you, like a Pavlovian dog, to expect nothing from them. By performing incompetence, they punish you for asking for help. It is a strategic trade-off where they accept looking stupid in exchange for total freedom from responsibility, leaving you crushed under the weight of managing two lives instead of one. They are not incapable, they are simply unwilling. and they have found a way to make their laziness your problem. Orbiting. They vanished from your life weeks ago. No texts, no calls, just a sudden cold silence that signaled the end. You are doing your best to move on, to heal, and to forget. But then, you post a photo on Instagram, and within minutes, there is their name at the top of your viewed list. They didn't reach out, but they are watching. This is orbiting, a phenomenon where a former partner or date cuts off all direct communication, effectively ghosting you, but continues to engage with your content on social media, keeping themselves just visible enough to remain relevant in your mind. This behavior operates as a form of digital haunting. The orbiter stays close enough to see you, but far enough away to never actually touch you. They treat your life like a television show that they are binge-watching in silence. They might like a tweet, view every single one of your stories, or react with an emoji, yet if you were to text them, they wouldn't reply. It creates a maddening state of cognitive dissonance. You find yourself analyzing their passive signals. Why are they watching me if they don't want me? Does this mean they miss me? The cruel reality is that orbiting is a low-effort strategy to keep a foot in the door. By keeping their avatar visible in your notification feed, they are squatting in your head rent-free. They are marking their territory, reminding you that they still exist, without having to do the emotional work of actually being in a relationship. It prevents you from getting closure. You cannot fully grieve the loss of the relationship because, in a digital sense, they aren't dead. They are lurking in the shadows. They keep you tethered to them, suspended in a state of confusion, ensuring that you remain an option on their shelf while they commit to nothing. Flying monkeys. You finally summon the courage to cut the cord, blocking their number and removing them from your life, believing the silence will finally bring you peace. But the silence is short-lived. Suddenly, the attacks start coming from directions you never expected. Your phone lights up with messages from mutual friends, family members, or even co-workers. They aren't checking on you. They are carrying the manipulator's water. He is devastated, they tell you, or she just wants closure. Why are you being so cruel? You realize with horror that while you were grieving in private, the manipulator was busy running a smear campaign in public, recruiting an army of enablers to force you back into line. These are the flying monkeys, a term borrowed from the Wizard of Oz, and they represent abuse by proxy. The manipulator spins a carefully crafted narrative of victimhood to these third parties, painting you as the unstable aggressor and themselves as the misunderstood saint. These recruits might be malicious, enjoying the drama, but often they are well-meaning people who have been duped by a master storyteller. They believe they are helping to fix a broken relationship, unaware that they are actually being used as weapons to violate your boundaries. They spy on your social media, report your movements back to the abuser, and deliver guilt trips designed to break your resolve. This tactic is devastating because it dismantles your support system precisely when you need it most. It isolates you, making you feel like the whole world has turned against you. You start to doubt your own reality again. If 10 people say you are the problem, maybe you are. It forces you into a defensive crouch, fighting a war on multiple fronts. You are no longer just dealing with a toxic ex. You are fighting a reputation war against a hive mind that has been poisoned against you. The ultimate goal is to make the cost of leaving so high, total social isolation, that you return to the abuser just to make the harassment stop. Negging. This arrives wrapped in the packaging of a compliment, but when you unwrap it, there is a razor blade inside. You are left confused, holding a statement that was technically nice, yet makes you feel suddenly inadequate. They might say, "You are so brave for wearing that. I could never pull it off with my body type." Or, "You're actually really articulate for someone from your background." On the surface, these sound like observations or praise, but the subtext is designed to cut you down just enough to make you stumble. It is a calculated social hack designed to lower your value relative to theirs without being overtly aggressive. If they insulted you directly, you would get defensive and leave. If they complimented you unconditionally, you might feel secure and independent. But by mixing the two, by giving you a backhanded compliment, they hit a psychological sweet spot that triggers your insecurity while simultaneously making you crave their approval. They position themselves as the judge of high standards, and you as the contestant who almost made the cut, but not quite. They are subtly telling you that you are flawed, but they are benevolent enough to overlook those flaws to be with you. This shifts the power dynamic instantly. You stop wondering if they are good enough for you, and start wondering if you are good enough for them. This tactic works because it weaponizes your own vanity and need for acceptance. Instead of rejecting the insult, you unconsciously try to prove them wrong. You work harder to show them you are smart, you are stylish, or you are worthy. You find yourself seeking their validation to heal the tiny wound they just inflicted. It creates a cycle where you are constantly jumping for a treat that is always held just out of reach. You end up grateful for the scraps of kindness they offer, not realizing that the hunger you feel was manufactured by the very person pretending to feed you. They are not offering you constructive criticism. They are managing your self-esteem to ensure it never gets high enough for you to realize you can do better. Darvo. You enter the conversation holding undeniable proof of a betrayal. Perhaps a text message, a bank statement, or a direct lie they told. You are calm, prepared, and seeking accountability. Yet within 10 minutes, the entire reality of the room has inverted. You are no longer the person seeking an apology. You are the one on your knees, begging for forgiveness, while they look down at you with wounded eyes. This disorientation is the signature of a specific three-step defensive maneuver designed to evade responsibility at all costs. First, they deny. It is not a hesitant denial. It is absolute, indignant, and total. Even looking at the evidence, they will say, "That didn't happen," or "You are misinterpreting everything." They refuse to engage with the reality of their actions, creating an immediate wall of cognitive dissonance. They don't just reject the accusation, they reject the shared reality that allows the accusation to exist. Then, they attack. The moment you falter, confused by their denial, they go on the offensive. They attack your credibility, your sanity, or your character. They might scream, "You are just like your mother." "You are obsessed with finding problems," or "I can't believe you would violate my privacy by looking at my phone." Suddenly the topic is no longer their betrayal. The topic is your reaction to it. They aggressively target your insecurities to put you on the back foot, forcing you to defend your right to speak rather than discussing what they did. Finally, they reverse victim and offender. This is the coup de grace. They twist the narrative so completely that they become the victim of your cruel accusations. They might cry, sulk, or claim that your lack of trust is destroying their mental health. They act crushed, asking how you could be so mean to them after everything they have done for you. The script flips. You, the actual victim, are now the persecutor causing them pain. Overwhelmed by their display of emotion and your own confusion, your empathy kicks in. You drop your grievance to comfort them. You end up apologizing for hurting their feelings, completely forgetting that you were the one who was wronged in the first place. This tactic is not just about winning an argument. It is a masterclass in psychological domination, ensuring that you never dare to hold them accountable again for fear of becoming the bad guy in your own story. Selective memory. You swear you had a conversation about this. You recall the specific words they used, the room you were sitting in, and the promise they made to change. But when you bring it up, they look at you with a blank, innocent stare and say, "I have absolutely no memory of that." It is not a denial of the event. It is a complete erasure of the file from the hard drive. This phenomenon is a convenient, strategic form of amnesia where a manipulator retains a razor-sharp, photographic memory for your mistakes, your flaws, and your past failures, yet suffers from a sudden, debilitating cognitive decline whenever they are required to take responsibility for their own actions. The trap lies in the inconsistency. If they truly had a bad memory, they would forget everything equally, where they put their keys, what time the movie starts, and the times you upset them. But that is not what happens. They can recite a transcript of an argument you had 3 years ago to prove you were wrong, yet they cannot seem to remember the agreement you made yesterday about finances or boundaries. They forget your birthday, they forget to pick up the kids, or they forget that they promised to stop texting an ex. This selective blankness forces you into the role of the relationship's historian and secretary. You find yourself constantly reminding them of basic reality, only to be accused of being a nag, controlling, or unable to let things go. This tactic works because it provides them with the ultimate plausible deniability. You cannot prove that someone remembers something. "I forgot" is a shield that is impossible to penetrate. If you get angry at someone for forgetting, you look unreasonable and lacking in empathy. They weaponize this social grace to evade accountability without ever having to say no. It is a passive-aggressive power play that communicates a brutal subtext. The things that matter to you are not significant enough to occupy space in their brain. By refusing to mentally record your needs, they force you to carry the entire mental load of the relationship, leaving you exhausted from doing the emotional labor for two people while they float through life, unburdened by the promises they never intended to keep. They are not forgetful. They are just indifferent to anything that does not serve their immediate gratification. Stonewalling. You are in the middle of a sentence, pouring your heart out, trying to resolve a conflict that matters deeply to you. Suddenly, the person across from you shuts down completely. They don't leave the room, but they have left the conversation. They cross their arms, avert their gaze, or stare past you with a glazed, unreadable expression. You ask a question, and you are met with absolute silence or a monosyllabic grunt. It feels like you are suddenly speaking to a statue. This is not a pause for reflection. It is an active, aggressive refusal to engage. They have erected an invisible emotional wall, and you are left banging your fists against it, desperate to be let back in. The dynamic is excruciating because their physical presence mocks you. They are right there, yet they are completely inaccessible. The more you plead, cry, or try to explain your point of view, the more rigid and impenetrable they become. They might pick up their phone and start scrolling, or turn on the TV, signaling that the most trivial entertainment is more important than your distress. This behavior sends a deafening message without saying a word. Your feelings are invalid, your perspective is irrelevant, and you do not exist to me right now. It reduces you to an annoyance, a fly buzzing around their head that they are waiting to swat away with their indifference. This tactic works because it triggers a physiological state known as flooding in the victim. When you are ignored by an attachment figure during a moment of vulnerability, your heart rate spikes, your stress hormones surge, and your body goes into panic mode. You feel abandoned and unsafe. The manipulator uses this biological reaction to control the pacing of the relationship. They know that if they stay behind the wall long enough, you will eventually stop trying to resolve the issue and start trying to resolve the silence. You will apologize for nagging or being too emotional just to get them to look at you again. By the time the wall comes down, the original problem is buried and you have learned a painful lesson. Bringing up issues results in abandonment. You stop voicing your needs to avoid the wall, granting them total immunity from ever having to change or compromise. They haven't just avoided a fight, they have trained you into silence. Trauma bonding. It explains the baffling phenomenon of why you feel an intense, magnetic loyalty to the very person who is destroying you. It is the reason you defend them to your friends, hide their cruelty from your family, and feel physically sick at the thought of leaving, even though you know staying might kill you. This is not love. It is a biological addiction formed through a cycle of intense stress and intermittent relief. The bond is forged not in shared happiness, but in shared survival of the chaos they created. The dynamic operates on a primal, chemical level. The abuser pushes you to the brink of emotional collapse, yelling, threatening abandonment, or terrifying you, flooding your system with cortisol, the stress hormone. You're in a state of high alert, desperate for safety. Then, just as you are about to break, they pivot. They offer a hug, a kind word, or a promise that we can get through this. In that moment of rescue, your brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin, the bonding chemicals. Because they are the source of the terror and the source of the comfort, your brain rewires itself to view them as your savior. You stop seeing them as the person who caused the pain. You see them as the only person who can take it away. You become biologically dependent on them to regulate your emotional state, much like a drug addict depends on a substance to stop the withdrawals. This mechanism creates a cognitive distortion known as betrayal blindness. To survive the dissonance of loving someone who hurts you, your mind compartmentalizes the abuse. You focus exclusively on the good times, the apologies, the make-up sex, the tearful reconciliations, while amnesia sets in for the bad times. You rationalize their behavior. They had a rough childhood. They didn't mean it, or I provoked them. You cling to the potential of who they could be, rather than the reality of who they are. The bond is harder to break than a healthy attachment because it is rooted in trauma, not trust. Breaking it feels like severing a limb because you aren't just leaving a partner. You are detaching from the only coping mechanism you have left to survive the world they built around you. You stay not because you want to, but because your survival instincts have been hijacked to believe that leaving them is more dangerous than staying. False urgency. The request always comes with a countdown attached. You are never allowed the luxury of a pause, a moment to reflect, or a chance to sleep on a decision. Instead, every issue is presented as a catastrophe that requires your immediate, undivided intervention. They call you in a panic, claiming they need money right now to avoid eviction, or they demand you commit to a major life change, moving in together, getting married, or quitting your job by the end of the day, or else the opportunity will be lost forever. The air around them vibrates with a frantic energy that seeps into your bones, convincing you that the sky is falling and that you are the only person strong enough to hold it up. If you hesitate, even for a second, to ask a logical question or check the details, the pressure intensifies. They don't just ask you to hurry, they attack your character. If you really loved me, you wouldn't hesitate, they say. Or, I can't believe you are stalling when I am in danger. They equate your need for time with a lack of care. You find yourself apologizing for wanting to think, swept up in a whirlwind of manufactured chaos. Your heart races, your adrenaline spikes, and your logical brain, the part that spots red flags and inconsistencies, shuts down completely. You are forced to make life-altering decisions in a state of fight or flight, driven by the terror of disappointing them or causing a disaster. This manipulation works because it systematically bypasses your critical thinking skills. Scammers and high-pressure salespeople use this exact technique. Limited time offer. Act now or lose it. In a relationship, the goal is to prevent you from consulting your intuition or your support system. They know that if you had 20 minutes to call a friend, check a bank statement, or simply breathe, you would realize that the emergency is a mirage. You would see that the deadline is fake and the stakes are fabricated. By keeping you in a constant state of breathless urgency, they ensure that you sign on the dotted line before you ever have a chance to read the contract. You wake up the next day, the panic subsided, realizing you have agreed to something that serves them entirely and traps you completely, all because they wouldn't let you stop running long enough to look at the map. Mirroring. It acts as a rapid-fire acceleration of intimacy, bypassing the natural, slow-building trust that defines healthy relationships. You share a vulnerability, perhaps a fear of rejection or a specific childhood memory, and they don't just listen. They lean in, their eyes wide, and claim to have experienced the exact same thing. You mention a core value like loyalty or ambition, and they passionately declare it to be the guiding principle of their life too. It feels like a cosmic alignment. You walk away from the interaction buzzing with adrenaline, convinced you have found your twin flame, or the one person who finally understands the language of your soul. But this synchronization is not fate. It is a calculated forgery. The manipulator is a shapeshifter, an empty vessel with no solid identity of their own. They are actively scanning you for cues, your posture, your slang, your grievances, and your desires, and then reassembling those pieces to construct a mask that looks exactly like your ideal partner. They are not connecting with you. They are becoming what you need them to be to lower your guard. If you are a rescuer, they play the damsel in distress. If you need a leader, they play the dominant authority. They are wearing a custom-tailored suit made of your own expectations. The devastation of mirroring lies in the inevitable devaluation phase. Because the persona is a performance, it is exhausting to maintain. Once they have secured your trust, your commitment, or your resources, the mask begins to slip. The person who loved your favorite band suddenly hates that noise. The person who shared your values suddenly acts in direct contradiction to them. You are left in a state of cognitive dissonance, desperately trying to find the person you fell in love with. You blame yourself, wondering what you did to change them, not realizing that the person you loved was never real. They were merely a reflection. And now that they have what they wanted, they have simply put the mirror down. The double bind. This is a psychological cage where a manipulator traps you between two conflicting demands, ensuring that you are punished no matter which choice you make. It is a game rigged for failure, designed to erode your sanity by making correct behavior impossible. The trap begins innocently enough, often disguised as a request for personal growth or better communication. They might tell you that they want you to be more vulnerable, to share your feelings more openly. You take this to heart, believing that opening up will bring you closer. But the moment you express a genuine emotion, perhaps a fear or a frustration, they recoil. They accuse you of being too sensitive, dramatic, or overwhelming. You are punished for doing exactly what they asked you to do. Confused, you try to adjust. You decide to be more stoic, to keep your feelings to yourself to avoid upsetting them. But then the ground shifts again. They accuse you of being distant, cold, or hiding things from them. You are now being punished for the opposite behavior. You find yourself stuck in a paralyzing loop. If you speak up, you are attacking them. If you stay silent, you are neglecting them. If you take charge, you are controlling. If you ask for their input, you are weak. Every path leads to criticism. This tactic works by inducing a state of profound psychological paralysis. Because the human brain is wired to seek patterns and logic, you waste enormous amounts of energy trying to decode their rules, not realizing the rules are constantly changing to ensure you lose. You start to second-guess your own reality, constantly scanning their face for micro-expressions of disapproval. You stop acting on your instincts because you are terrified of stepping on a landmine that wasn't there yesterday. Over time, this destroys your internal compass. You become incapable of making decisions without their approval, effectively handing them total control over your autonomy. They are not looking for a partner who does the right thing. They are looking for a partner who is too afraid to do anything at all. Future faking. This is a manipulation tactic where a predator creates a detailed, alluring vision of the future to extract resources from you in the present. It begins with a rush of shared dreams that feels like destiny. They don't just promise commitment. They visualize it with high-definition specificity. They talk about where you will live, the names of your future children, the business you will start, or the trips you will take next summer. This is not idle daydreaming. It is a strategic bombardment of hope. Because the details are so specific, your brain bypasses skepticism and registers their words as plans rather than fantasies. You begin to organize your current reality around this imaginary timeline. You turn down other offers, ignore red flags, or lend them money, believing you are investing in a guaranteed outcome. You endure their bad behavior in the present because you are fixated on the payoff coming later. But the timeline acts like a mirage. As soon as you step closer, it moves further away. When the date for the vacation arrives, a crisis happens. When the topic of marriage comes up, they need just a little more time to get established. The goalposts shift silently. The excuses are logical enough to keep you compliant, but vague enough to prevent you from pinning them down. This works because your brain struggles to distinguish between a vividly imagined future and a memory. By constantly forcing you to visualize the reward, they trigger a dopamine release in the present, making you addicted to the potential of the relationship rather than the reality of it. You become a gambler at a slot machine, pulling the lever for a jackpot that was rigged from the start. The promises are not a roadmap to a shared life. They are a leash designed to keep you walking in circles. Love bombing, a predatory manipulation strategy where an individual overwhelms you with excessive affection, flattery, and attention to establish rapid dominance. It begins with an intensity that disarms your instincts. They don't just appreciate you, they idolize you. From the moment you meet, they bombard your phone with messages, plan elaborate dates, and declare you their soulmate with frightening conviction. They mirror your values and interests, becoming a perfect reflection of everything you have ever wanted. This is not intimacy, it is data collection. They are learning exactly what you need to hear so they can become indispensable to your happiness. Your boundaries dissolve under the sheer weight of their adoration. You feel special, seen, and safe. But this golden period has an expiration date. Once they sense you are fully invested, when you have introduced them to your family or committed to them exclusively, the mask slips. The adoration abruptly turns into devaluation. The texts stop coming. The compliments turn into subtle digs at your insecurities. When you ask what is wrong, they accuse you of being needy or demanding. You are left reeling, desperate to fix a problem that doesn't exist. This works by hijacking your brain's reward system. The initial phase creates a massive dopamine spike, and the withdrawal creates a crash that feels like physical pain. You stay and endure their cruelty, not because you trust them, but because you are addicted to the relief you feel when they show you a flicker of kindness. You are not fighting for a relationship. You are chasing a high that they control. The love bomb was never about connection. It was about conditioning you to accept the abuse that follows. Intermittent reinforcement, a specific form of psychological conditioning where rewards, such as affection, attention, or validation, are delivered unpredictably rather than consistently. It is the single most powerful method for creating a trauma bond because it turns a relationship into a biological addiction. The cycle typically begins with a golden period of intense, consistent warmth. In the early days, they are attentive, responsive, and loving. Your brain establishes this behavior as the baseline. You learn to expect that when you reach out, they will respond. You feel secure, believing you have found a stable connection. Then, without any warning or logical trigger, the pattern breaks. The warmth vanishes, replaced by coldness, silence, or subtle cruelty. You send a text, and they don't reply for hours. You ask a question, and they answer with a monosyllable. Confusion sets in. You replay every interaction, scanning your memory for the mistake you must have made to cause this shift. You double your efforts, trying to be sweeter, quieter, or more helpful to win back the version of them you know exists. Just as your anxiety reaches a breaking point and you consider walking away, they suddenly return. They send a funny meme, offer a compliment, or act as if nothing happened. The relief you feel in that moment is chemical. Your brain is flooded with dopamine, not just because you are happy, but because the threat of abandonment has been lifted. This intense relief reinforces your behavior. You learn that if you just wait long enough and try hard enough, the good version of them will come back. This is the exact psychological mechanism behind gambling addiction. A slot machine is addictive precisely because it does not pay out every time. If you won every time, you would get bored. If you lost every time, you would quit. But because the win is unpredictable, you keep pulling the lever, glued to the machine, chasing the high of the next random payout. In a relationship, this turns love into a game of chance where you are always losing, but stay for the rare moments you are allowed to win. Gaslighting. It begins with a tiny, almost imperceptible edit to your reality. They don't attack you with a sledgehammer. They use a scalpel. You mention a comment they made yesterday, a small insult or a promise, and they look at you with genuine confusion and say, "I never said that." They might chuckle and add, "You've been so stressed lately, you're imagining things." The denial is so casual, so calm, that you instinctually check yourself. You assume you must be the one who is mistaken. After all, why would they lie about something so trivial? But slowly, these edits accumulate until the foundation of your world begins to crack. They hide your keys and help you find them, lamenting your forgetfulness. They deny events that you have physical proof of, but they do it with such absolute conviction that you start to feel like the crazy one for arguing. The goal is not just to win an argument, it is to unmoor you from your own senses. You stop trusting your eyes, your ears, and your memory. You become a detective in your own life, recording conversations and taking notes just to prove you exist. This mechanism works because it exploits the human brain's need for social synchronization. When someone we trust reflects a reality back to us that contradicts our own, the cognitive dissonance is painful. To resolve the pain, we eventually submit to their version of the truth because it is less terrifying than believing our partner is a calculated liar. By the end, you are a hollow shell, looking to them to tell you what is real, which is the ultimate form of submission. Triangulation. They introduce a shadow into your relationship, a third person who is everything you are seemingly not. Triangulation is a calculated manipulation strategy where a partner brings an outsider into your dynamic to engineer jealousy and insecurity. It rarely starts with overt cheating or hostility. Instead, it begins with casual, innocent comparisons that prick at your self-esteem. They might mention how hilarious their new coworker is, or casually reminisce about how their ex never had an issue with the things you find difficult. These comments are dropped like seeds, designed to make you feel slightly inadequate without giving you enough grounds to start a fight. Suddenly, you are no longer the only person on the stage. You feel a subtle, creeping pressure to compete for their attention. You find yourself dressing better, working harder, or suppressing your needs just to prove that you are better than this invisible rival. When you express discomfort, they gaslight you, calling you jealous, insecure, or crazy for worrying about a friend. They create a scenario where you are fighting for your position in the relationship while they sit back and watch the performance. They might even manufacture a love triangle where none exists, flirting with others in front of you just to check if you are still desperate enough to chase them. This tactic works by manufacturing artificial scarcity, by suggesting that they are in high demand and that others are waiting to take your spot. They trigger your primal fear of abandonment. Your value drops and their value skyrockets. You stop asking whether they are treating you well and start asking what you need to do to keep them. It turns your relationship into a contest where the prize is a person who is actively enjoying your pain. Reactive abuse. This manipulation begins with a simple request for help that seemingly goes well. You ask them to handle a basic adult responsibility, loading the dishwasher, mailing a package, or watching the kids for an hour. They don't refuse. In fact, they agree cheerfully. It looks like teamwork. You relax believing you have a partner who shares the load. But when you return to check on the task, it is a catastrophe. The dishes are jammed in randomly and still dirty. The package was sent to the wrong address. The kids are unsupervised while they stare at a screen. When you point out the mistake, thinking it was an honest error, they weaponize their own helplessness. They look at you with wide, innocent eyes and say, "I'm just not good at this stuff like you are." Or, "I tried my best. Why are you always criticizing me?" Suddenly, you are the villain. You feel guilty for getting angry at someone who tried. Frustrated and exhausted, you sigh, step in, and fix the mess yourself because it is faster than teaching them. The next time a chore needs doing, you don't even ask. You simply do it yourself to avoid the stress of managing their failure. This is the trap. They have successfully trained you, like a Pavlovian dog, to expect nothing from them. By performing incompetence, they punish you for asking for help. It is a strategic trade-off where they accept looking stupid in exchange for total freedom from responsibility, leaving you crushed under the weight of managing two lives instead of one. They are not incapable, they are simply unwilling, and they have found a way to make their laziness your problem. The silent treatment. Silence is usually a tool for reflection, but in the hands of a manipulator, it becomes a weapon of psychological annihilation. The silent treatment is not merely a refusal to speak, it is a refusal to acknowledge your existence. It often arrives without a singular, explosive argument. You might simply ask a question they dislike, or set a boundary they find inconvenient. Instead of arguing, they go dead. They don't just stop talking, they erase you. They look right through you as if you are made of glass. They walk around you in the kitchen like you are an inanimate object, scrolling on their phone, laughing at videos, completely unaffected while you stand there in agony. The silence creates a vacuum, and your anxiety rushes in to fill it. You ask, "What's wrong?" No answer. You ask, "Are you mad?" No answer. You begin to panic. Your mind starts racing, replaying the last 24 hours in high definition, searching for the crime you must have committed. Did you use the wrong tone? Did you forget something? You start apologizing, not because you are sorry, but because the silence is so deafening you will say anything to make it stop. You text them long paragraphs explaining yourself, begging for a single word of acknowledgement, but they leave you on read. This tactic works because it targets the most primal fear in the human brain: abandonment. To our ancestors, being ignored by the tribe meant death. When a partner ignores you, it triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain. You feel physically sick, anxious, and desperate. They know this. They are not taking space to cool off. They are watching you squirm. They are waiting for your self-esteem to break completely, so that when they finally decide to speak, you are so grateful for their voice that you will accept whatever terms they dictate just to stay in the warmth. Moving the goalposts. You finish a task exhausted but proud, expecting approval, only to find the finish line has been secretly moved a mile down the road. Moving the goalposts is a manipulation tactic designed to ensure you never experience the satisfaction of enough. It often begins with a clear, defined request. They tell you, "If you just get a better job, we won't fight about money anymore." Or, "If you just cut off that one friend, I'll trust you completely." The terms seem fair. You sacrifice, you work harder, and you meet their condition. You present your success to them, waiting for the peace they promised. But instead of relief, you get a new critique. "Well, sure you got the job," they say, "but now you're working too many hours and neglecting me." Or, "You blocked that friend, but you didn't do it fast enough, so I still don't feel safe." The original agreement vanishes, replaced instantly by a new, harder requirement you never agreed to. Your success is dismissed as the bare minimum. You are left running on a treadmill, sprinting toward a horizon that retreats with every step you take. This works by destroying your internal sense of competence. After enough cycles, you stop trusting your own judgment of what good looks like. You become hypervigilant, constantly trying to anticipate their next demand, second-guessing every choice. You start believing that you are the problem, that you are just fundamentally inadequate, not realizing that the game is rigged. They don't want you to succeed. If you succeeded, you would feel good about yourself. And if you felt good about yourself, you might realize you don't need to jump through their hoops anymore. The goal is not perfection. The goal is exhaustion. Projection. It feels like you are staring into a funhouse mirror where your own virtues are distorted and their vices are reflected onto you. Projection is a defense mechanism turned into an attack weapon, where a manipulator accuses you of the very behaviors they are secretly guilty of. It often hits you out of nowhere. You are loyal, yet they accuse you of flirting with the waiter. You are honest, yet they call you a compulsive liar. You are calm, yet they scream that you are always looking for a fight. The accusations are so specific and unfounded that they leave you stunned. This confusion is the point. While you are busy defending yourself, listing the reasons why you didn't cheat, showing them your phone, explaining your innocent intentions, you are not looking at them. You are so focused on proving your innocence that you fail to notice the lipstick on their collar or the lies in their own stories. They have successfully shifted the spotlight. By accusing you first, they put you on the defensive, ensuring that if you ever catch them doing the same thing later, it will look like you are just retaliating. This tactic works because decent people assume accusations are based on reality. You search your soul for guilt because you care about being a good person. The manipulator exploits this conscience. They offload their own shame onto you, forcing you to carry the emotional baggage for their sins. Over time, you start to internalize their warped reality. You become paranoid about your own behavior, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering an accusation, while they walk freely, unburdened by the guilt they just dumped on your shoulders. It is a sleight of hand trick. Look over here at your fake crime, so you don't see my real one. Breadcrumbing. Breadcrumbing is a pervasive form of digital manipulation, where an individual scatters sporadic morsels of attention, flirty texts, sudden likes, or vague promises, to keep you emotionally tethered without ever intending to commit to a real relationship. The trap is often set in the confusing situationship phase. You haven't heard from them in days or even weeks. You are finally starting to heal, to regain your footing, perhaps even deciding to delete their number. Then, precisely at the moment you begin to pull away, your phone lights up. A "Hey stranger," a nostalgic meme, or a comment on your Instagram story. It requires almost zero effort on their part, a flick of a thumb. But for you, it is a seismic event. Your brain, starved for connection, overanalyzes this tiny signal. They must be thinking about me. They must miss what we had. You reply, perhaps a bit too eager, and for a few hours, the connection feels alive again. They engage, they banter. They might even suggest, we should hang out soon. But the soon never has a date attached. The moment you try to pin them down for a concrete plan, or the moment you ask for clarity, they ghost again. The crumb has been consumed, their ego has been fed, and you are left alone with your hunger. This tactic works by exploiting the scarcity principle and the psychology of hope. When you are deprived of affection, your standards for what constitutes love plummet. You begin to accept bare minimum effort as a grand romantic gesture because you are so afraid of losing the connection entirely. You convince yourself that they are just busy or complicated, rather than accepting the brutal truth. They are bored. They are keeping you on the back burner, ensuring you remain an available option in case their primary pursuit falls through. They don't want you, but they don't want anyone else to have you either. By keeping you in a state of suspended animation, always waiting for the next notification, they prevent you from moving on to someone who would offer you the whole loaf, not just the scraps from their table. Victim reversal. You walk into the room holding the smoking gun. Undeniable proof that they betrayed you. But within 10 minutes, the entire gravitational field of the reality has shifted, and you are the one on trial. victim reversal is a masterclass in emotional sleight of hand, where the perpetrator successfully hijacks the narrative of victimhood, leaving the actual victim to assume the role of the aggressor. It often happens so fast that it causes psychological whiplash. You confront them about their infidelity, their lies, or their theft, and instead of remorse, you are met with a breakdown. They collapse into tears, screaming that they are worthless, or they accuse you of being cold and unloving for attacking them when they are already struggling so much. Suddenly, the topic of the conversation is no longer their specific action. It is your reaction to it. They point to your raised voice, your angry text messages, or your accusatory tone as proof that you are the abusive one. They might say, "I only lied because I was terrified of how you would react," effectively blaming you for their dishonesty. By framing their abuse as a survival mechanism against your tyranny, they absolve themselves of all accountability. They weaponize your own empathy against you. Because you are a decent person, you cannot stand to see someone in pain, even if they caused it. Your instinct to comfort kicks in, overriding your instinct to protect yourself. The brilliance of this manipulation lies in its ability to exploit the social contract. We are taught that the person crying is the one who needs help, and the person yelling is the danger. The manipulator knows this. They perform vulnerability to trigger your guilt. You end up apologizing for hurting their feelings, dropping your legitimate grievance to soothe their ego. The interaction concludes with a perverse distortion of reality. You are comforting the person who stabbed you, wiping their tears while your own wound is still bleeding. You leave the argument feeling confused and guilty, believing that if you were just kinder or more understanding, they wouldn't be forced to act out, effectively taking the blame for your own abuse. Hoovering, just when the dust has finally settled, when you have stopped checking their social media, when your nervous system has ceased its constant vibration, and you are beginning to remember who you were before them, the notification appears. Hoovering is a cynical recovery tactic named after the vacuum cleaner, designed to suck you back into the void of the relationship after a period of separation or silence. It rarely begins with a threat. Instead, it arrives as a benign, sentimental probe. A text on your birthday, a link to a song that made me cry, or a sudden, "I found your old t-shirt, do you want it back?" Sometimes, it masquerades as a fabricated crisis. They might claim a medical emergency, a family death, or a sudden spiritual awakening where they have finally realized their mistakes. They know exactly which buttons to press: your guilt, your nostalgia, or your savior complex. If you are empathetic, they play the victim who needs you. If you are sentimental, they play the lover who misses you. It is a calculated test of your boundaries to see if the door is still unlocked. The cruelty of hoovering is that it resets your healing clock. It forces you to bargain with hope again. You think, maybe they have changed, or maybe this time will be different. But the vacuum doesn't suck you back in to love you. It sucks you back in to drain you. They are not returning because they realized your value. They are returning because their other sources of supply have dried up, and they need a quick, reliable fix to boost their ego. The moment you engage, the changed person vanishes, and the abuse cycle resumes exactly where it left off, usually with higher intensity to punish you for leaving in the first place. Word salad. You ask a simple, direct question. Did you transfer the money? Or, why were you texting her at midnight? And instead of an answer, you are shoved into a verbal labyrinth. 10 minutes later, you are dizzily discussing the philosophical nature of trust. defending a tone of voice you used 3 years ago, and listening to a monologue about how hard their childhood was. You look back at your original question and realize it has been buried under an avalanche of irrelevant noise. This is word salad, a chaotic mix of circular reasoning, projection, unrelated tangents, and pseudo-intellectual gibberish designed to short-circuit your logical brain. It feels like you are arguing with a fever dream. The manipulator deliberately refuses to connect cause and effect. If you say A happened, they reply with purple. They will string together complex sentences that sound profound or emotional but contain absolutely no semantic meaning. They might say, I just feel like your insistence on defining the narrative is actually a projection of your own insecurity about the fluidity of our connection. It is a wall of sound meant to disorient you. You find yourself trying to parse their sentences, acting as a translator for their nonsense, effectively doing all the cognitive work while they sit back and watch you spin. The goal of this tactic is not communication, it is attrition. They are filibustering the argument. They know that they are wrong, and they know that they cannot win on the facts. So, they switch the game to endurance. They talk in circles until you are so mentally exhausted, so confused, and so sick of the sound of their voice that you drop the subject just to make the noise stop. You accept a non-answer, or even apologize for confusing them, simply to buy back your peace and quiet. It works because it exploits your desire for resolution. You keep engaging because you think, if I just explain it one more time, they will get it. But they understand perfectly. They are not trying to resolve the conflict. They are drowning the truth in a flood of words until you lose the will to swim. Information withholding. It is the art of lying without technically speaking a falsehood. Information withholding is a manipulation tactic where an individual deliberately conceals key facts, feelings, or plans to control your perception of reality. It feels like you are trying to solve a puzzle, but someone has secretly removed half the pieces while watching you struggle to make the picture make sense. You might sense that something is off, a shift in their mood, a strange charge on the credit card, or a sudden change in schedule, but when you ask them about it, they give you the bare minimum. They answer the specific question you asked, but they omit the crucial context that would change the entire meaning of the answer. Later, when the truth inevitably surfaces, they rely on the technicality of their silence to evade guilt. They will say, I didn't lie to you, I just didn't tell you. Or the classic gaslighting defense. You never asked me specifically about that. They shift the burden of discovery onto you, acting as if it was your job to conduct a forensic interrogation to get the truth. If you get upset, they accuse you of being paranoid or invasive. They might claim they hid the information to protect you or to avoid a fight, framing their deception as an act of benevolence. This tactic is devastating because it steals your agency. Every decision you make, to trust them, to stay with them, to support them, is based on a fraudulent data set. By controlling what you know, they control how you react. It creates a severe power imbalance where they are the director of the movie and you are just an actor who hasn't been given the full script. You are left feeling anxious and hypervigilant, constantly reading between the lines and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because you have learned that the silence is often more dangerous than the noise. They are not keeping secrets from you. They are keeping secrets against you, hoarding information as a way to maintain dominance. Smear campaigns. It is a preemptive military strike on your reputation, often launched while you are still sleeping in the same bed as your assassin. A smear campaign is not merely gossip, it is a calculated, systematic effort to destroy your credibility and social standing, to ensure that when the relationship inevitably ends, you will have nowhere to turn. The manipulator knows that you hold the truth, the evidence of their abuse, their lies, and their cruelty. To protect themselves, they must discredit the witness before you ever take the stand. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its subtle execution. They rarely paint you as a villain because that would make them look bitter. Instead, they paint you as unstable, fragile, or mentally unwell. They go to your mutual friends, your family, or your co-workers with a look of deep faux concern and say, "I'm really worried about her drinking lately," or "He's been having these paranoid delusions and I don't know how to help him." They share your secrets, your fears, and your private breakdowns, but they strip away the context. They show the world your reaction to their abuse, but hide the abuse itself, effectively framing your survival instincts as symptoms of insanity. By the time you finally build the courage to speak up or leave, the trap has already snapped shut. You reach out to a friend for support, only to find a cold shoulder or a skeptical look. You realize with horror that your support system has been poisoned against you. You are not just fighting a breakup, you are fighting a reputation war against a narrative that has been cementing itself for months. This isolation is the ultimate goal. By stripping you of your allies, they force you to remain dependent on them, or they ensure that even if you do escape, you leave as a pariah, discredited, silenced, and alone, while they walk away looking like the saint who tried everything to save you. Isolation. The world around you begins to shrink, not with a bang, but in tiny, imperceptible increments, until you are living in a universe inhabited by only 2 people. Isolation is rarely achieved through physical force or locked doors. Instead, it is accomplished through a relentless campaign of psychological attrition. It often disguises itself as intense romantic focus. They might whisper, "We don't need anyone else," or "No one understands our love but us." At first, it feels flattering, an us against the world dynamic that makes you feel special and protected. But soon the narrative shifts. They begin to plant seeds of doubt about your support system. Your best friend is jealous, your mother is controlling, or your co-workers are disrespectful to the relationship. Over time, they institute a social tax on your connections. Every time you go out for coffee with a friend or visit your family, you pay a price. You come home to the silent treatment, a 3-hour interrogation about who you spoke to, or a sudden mood swing that ruins the rest of the week. You start to run a cost-benefit analysis in your head. Is seeing my sister worth 3 days of fighting? Eventually, the answer becomes no. You stop accepting invitations. You stop returning calls. You ghost the people who love you, not because you want to, but because it is simply easier to stay home and keep the peace than to deal with the punishment that awaits you if you leave. The strategic goal of this tactic is the removal of your reality checks. Friends and family act as mirrors. They reflect who you used to be and provide a baseline for what normal, healthy behavior looks like. When you are cut off from them, you lose your point of reference. The abuser becomes your sole source of information, reality, and validation. Without a witness to say, "Hey, that's not okay," the abuse begins to feel normal. You forget that you were once a person with hobbies, opinions, and a voice. You become an island, and the manipulator ensures they are the only boat allowed to dock, leaving you trapped with no lifeline to the outside world when things inevitably turn dark. Financial abuse. It often begins under the guise of partnership or even generosity. Let me handle the bills so you don't have to stress about the math, they say, or you don't need to work. I make enough for both of us. At first, it feels like a relief, a sign that they want to take care of you. But slowly, the dynamic shifts from support to surveillance. You find yourself standing in a grocery store, heart racing, staring at a card terminal, terrified that the transaction will be declined because they moved the funds without telling you. You start hiding receipts, not because you bought anything illicit, but because you know you will face a 3-hour interrogation over a $5 coffee. Financial abuse is the systematic dismantling of your economic independence to ensure you can never afford the price of your own freedom. It manifests in a spectrum of control tactics, giving you a strict allowance like a child, seizing your paycheck the moment it hits the account, ruining your credit score by running up debt in your name, or sabotaging your employment by causing you to be late or miss shifts. They might buy you expensive gifts to show the world how generous they are, yet deny you access to basic funds for gas or medical co-pays. They effectively place you in golden handcuffs. You might live in a nice house, but you have zero liquidity to leave it. The psychological impact is devastating because it infantilizes you. By stripping you of your purchasing power, they strip you of your adult agency. You are forced to ask for permission to exist. This creates a terrifying practical reality. You might want to leave, you might need to leave to save your life, but you cannot. You cannot hire a lawyer, you cannot put a deposit on an apartment, and you cannot even buy a bus ticket. The abuser knows that money is the ultimate passport to the outside world. By seizing your resources, they build an invisible prison where the walls are made of poverty and the bars are made of debt, ensuring that you remain trapped not by love, but by logistical necessity. Catastrophizing. Imagine dropping a single pebble into a still pond and, instead of gentle ripples, watching a tsunami rise up to destroy the shoreline. This is the distorted physics of catastrophizing. It is a manipulation tactic where the mundane is alchemized into the monstrous. To a healthy mind, a missed phone call is just a missed call. To the catastrophizer, it is undeniable proof of abandonment, a prelude to a breakup, or a sign of a medical emergency. There is no middle ground in their emotional landscape, only perfection or the apocalypse. This behavior functions as a high-stakes form of emotional filibustering. By treating every minor deviation from their expectations as a life-altering crisis, the manipulator effectively holds the relationship hostage. They do not just express disappointment, they perform terror. If you suggest a small change, like spending a weekend apart or trying a new hobby, they don't discuss the logistics. Instead, they immediately vividly describe how this choice will lead to a chain reaction of disaster. The car will break down, you will drift apart, the relationship will fail, and they will be left alone. They connect dot A to dot Z in a terrifying straight line, completely bypassing all logic, probability, and reality in between. The ultimate goal of this sky is falling narrative is to paralyze your autonomy through fear. You stop making decisions based on your own desires and start making them based solely on prevention. You become a crisis manager, constantly scanning the horizon for anything that might trigger their doom spiraling. You find yourself suppressing your own needs and hiding your own problems because they seem trivial compared to the jagged peaks of trauma your partner is constantly navigating. Your world shrinks. You avoid taking risks, you avoid change, and you avoid speaking up, simply because the energy required to talk them down from the ledge is far greater than the cost of your own silence. You are forced to live in a permanent state of emergency management, exhausted by a fire drill that never ends. Intellectualization. It is the transformation of human connection into a cold, clinical autopsy. Intellectualization is a defense mechanism weaponized to strip a conflict of all its emotional weight, reducing a moment of genuine pain into a dry, academic debate. When you approach them with a grievance, perhaps you are crying, hurt, or angry, they do not meet you with empathy. Instead, they meet you with a clipboard. They detach completely from the feeling of the situation and obsessively focus on the facts, the timeline, and the semantics of the words you used. They act less like a partner and more like a high-priced defense attorney or a scientist examining a specimen under a microscope. The dynamic is maddening because it invalidates your reality through logic. You might say, "I feel unloved when you ignore me," and they respond with a dissertation on the definition of ignore. They will cite specific timestamps of when they spoke to you, argue that statistically, they spend 40% of their free time with you, and conclude that your feeling is therefore factually incorrect. They treat emotions as variables in an equation that can be debunked with better data. By filtering the conflict through a lens of extreme rationality and complex vocabulary, they position themselves as the rational adult and you as the hysterical child. They remain calm, cool, and detached, while you grow increasingly frustrated and emotional, which they then use as further proof of your instability. This tactic serves as an impenetrable fortress against vulnerability. By staying safely in their head, they never have to drop down into their heart, where they might be forced to feel guilt, shame, or true empathy. They use their intelligence as a shield to deflect accountability, burying the simple truth of your pain under a mountain of jargon, philosophy, and analysis. You walk away from the conversation feeling intellectually outmaneuvered but emotionally abandoned, holding a perfectly logical explanation for why your feelings don't matter. They haven't resolved the issue. They have simply successfully argued that you don't have the right to feel it. Emotional blackmail. The dynamic operates essentially as a hidden hostage negotiation, where the weapon of choice is not a gun, but the relationship itself. Emotional blackmail is a powerful form of manipulation, where an individual uses your fears, your sense of obligation, and your guilt to control your behavior. It is built upon a brutal, unspoken contract. If you do not do what I want, you will suffer. This suffering might take the form of the silent treatment, an explosive rage fit, a threat to end the relationship, or even a threat of self-harm. The blackmailer effectively holds your emotional well-being, or the survival of the bond, over the edge of a cliff, demanding a ransom of compliance to pull it back to safety. Psychologists often refer to the fog that this creates as fog, fear, obligation, and guilt. The blackmailer is a master at navigating this haze. They know precisely where your buttons are because you likely installed them yourself during moments of vulnerability. If you pride yourself on being a loyal partner, they will frame your refusal as a betrayal. If you are afraid of abandonment, they will pack a bag the moment you assert a boundary. They weaponize your empathy against you, transforming your compassion into a weakness. They are not asking for a favor. They are issuing a demand wrapped in the language of victimhood or love. Phrases like, "If you really loved me, you would do this," or "I can't believe you're being this selfish after all I've done," are the hallmarks of this coercion. The tragedy of this tactic lies in the cycle of compliance. When you give in to the demand to stop the punishment or ease the tension, you feel a momentary wave of relief. The crisis is averted and peace returns. However, this relief is a trap. By surrendering, you have taught the blackmailer a critical lesson. Their tactics work. You have reinforced the behavior, ensuring that the next time they want something, they will use the exact same leverage, often with increased intensity. Slowly, your own needs, desires, and boundaries are eroded until you are entirely hollowed out, living your life in a permanent defensive crouch, solely dedicated to keeping the blackmailer from pulling the trigger on the misery they have promised you. The strawman fallacy. You make a specific, moderate request. Perhaps you ask, "Could you please text me if you're going to be home late, so I don't worry?" It is a reasonable boundary regarding communication. Yet, the response you receive is an explosion of indignation. They recoil as if you've just demanded the password to every account they own. "Oh, so now I have to check in with you every 5 minutes? You want to put a GPS tracker on me and control every move I make?" You stand there, stunned. You never said anything about checking in every 5 minutes. You never mentioned a tracker. But suddenly, you're no longer discussing your need for reassurance. You are fiercely defending yourself against the accusation of being a controlling, paranoid tyrant. This is the strawman fallacy in action. It is a diversionary tactic where the manipulator takes your actual argument, distorts it into an extreme, ridiculous, or unrecognizable caricature, the strawman, and then proceeds to tear that caricature apart. They do not engage with what you actually said because your real point is reasonable and difficult to refute. Instead, they swap your point for a weaker, exaggerated version that is easy to defeat. They aren't fighting you. They are fighting a fictional monster they have projected onto you. The psychological impact of this tactic is pure derailment. It forces you off the offensive and onto the defensive. Instead of holding them accountable for their lateness, you waste your energy correcting their distortion. "No, I didn't say I wanted to control you. I just said..." By the time you have finished explaining what you didn't mean, the original issue, their lack of consideration, has been completely forgotten. The manipulator claims victory because they successfully defeated the idea that they should be tracked 24/7, even though that idea never existed in the first place. This creates a maddening dynamic where you feel unheard and misrepresented. You start to fear speaking up because you know your words will be twisted into weapons against you. You begin to over-explain, prefacing every request with a dozen disclaimers. "I'm not trying to be nagging, and I don't want to control you, but..." hoping to preempt the distortion. But it rarely works, because the distortion is not a misunderstanding. It is a strategy. They know exactly what you meant. They just pretend otherwise to avoid the inconvenience of meeting your needs. Destabilization. Imagine trying to walk across a floor that tilts violently and unpredictably every few minutes. You can never find your footing, your muscles are constantly tense, and your entire focus is consumed simply by the effort to remain upright. This is the psychological reality of destabilization. It is a calculated strategy of erosion used to dismantle your confidence, your sense of security, and your ability to trust your own judgment. The manipulator's goal is not necessarily to hurt you in a single explosive event, but to keep you in a permanent state of off-balance, ensuring that you are never steady enough to plan an escape or fight back. The primary weapon in this arsenal is unpredictability. In a healthy relationship, there is a rhythm and a consistency to how you are treated. In a destabilizing dynamic, the climate changes without warning. The person who was affectionate and charming at breakfast might look at you with cold, silent contempt by lunch, with absolutely no external trigger. Rules that were established yesterday are broken today. Promises made last week are denied this week. They might suddenly pick a fight right before a job interview or a major social event, a tactic known as sabotage, specifically to rattle you when you need your composure the most. By destroying the link between your actions and their reactions, they train you to believe that you have no control over your own reality. This tactic works by forcing you into a state of hypervigilance. Because you cannot predict the next blow, you stop living your life and start studying them. You become a meteorologist of their moods, scanning their micro-expressions, their tone of voice, and the slam of a door to forecast the weather. This obsession consumes your mental energy, leaving you exhausted and brain-fogged. Slowly, your world shrinks. You stop trusting your perceptions because the environment is always shifting. When you are dizzy and disoriented, you instinctively reach out for something to hold on to. And in a cruel irony, the only steady thing in your world is the very person shaking the ground beneath your feet. They break your legs, then hand you a crutch, ensuring that you are grateful for the support rather than angry about the injury. Pathological lying. It is not just dishonesty, it is a way of life. Pathological lying, also known as mythomania or pseudologia fantastica, distinguishes itself from normal lying by its frequency, its compulsiveness, and its often bafflingly unnecessary nature. Most people lie to avoid punishment or to gain a specific advantage. A pathological liar, however, lies as naturally as they breathe. They will lie about big things, their job title, their family history, a terminal illness they don't have, but they will also lie about the mundane. They will claim they had eggs for breakfast when they had toast. They will say they bought a shirt at a boutique when they got it at a discount store. There is often no discernible motive other than the thrill of deception or the momentary construction of a better reality. Living with a pathological liar is like trying to build a house on quicksand. You can never find a solid foundation of truth to stand on. Because they lie with such fluidity and conviction, often believing their own fabrications in the moment, they lack the tells of a normal liar. They look you in the eye, they don't fidget, and their stories are rich with specific, albeit invented, details. When you catch them in a contradiction, they don't confess. Instead, they seamlessly weave a new lie to cover the old one, creating a complex, labyrinthine narrative that leaves you questioning your own memory. They might even get angry at you for doubting them, gaslighting you into believing that you are the one who is confused or mistrusting. The danger of this dynamic is the erosion of reality. Over time, you stop asking questions because you know you will never get a straight answer. You begin to play detective in your own life, cross-referencing their stories with receipts, texts, and public records just to verify basic facts. The relationship becomes a hollow shell because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires truth. You cannot connect with a person who does not exist. You are in a relationship with a character they have invented, and the moment you get too close to the man behind the curtain, they spin a new illusion to keep you at a distance. You realize that to them, the truth is not a fixed moral baseline. It is merely a tool to be shaped, twisted, or discarded to suit the needs of the moment. Minimization. You summon the courage to address a deep wound, laying out exactly how their actions hurt you, only to be met with a casual shrug and a roll of the eyes. You are making a mountain out of a molehill, they say, or, God, you are so sensitive. Minimization is the psychological art of shrinking reality. It is distinct from denial. They do not claim the event didn't happen. Instead, they admit it happened but insist that it doesn't matter. They take a boulder of abuse and verbally grind it down into a pebble, then mock you for stumbling over it. This tactic relies on invalidation to escape accountability. By framing your reaction as the problem rather than their action, they effectively rewrite the social contract. If they humiliate you in public and you get upset, they claim it was just a joke and that you have no sense of humor. If they betray your trust, they argue that everyone does it, or that you are blowing things out of proportion. They recalibrate the scale of acceptable behavior so that their cruelty registers as normal and your pain registers as hysteria. They act as the sole arbiter of what is big enough to be upset about, and conveniently, nothing they do ever crosses that threshold. The long-term impact is a corrosive doubt that eats away at your self-esteem. When your emotions are constantly treated as invalid or excessive, you begin to suppress them. You stop bringing up grievances because you don't want to be the nag or the drama queen. You start to apologize for being in pain. You might even find yourself minimizing the abuse to others. He didn't hit me that hard, or she only screams when she's stressed, because you have internalized their voice. You learn to live in a world where your feelings are treated as inconvenient noise, eventually becoming numb just to survive the constant dismissal of your own humanity. Whataboutism? You finally corner them with undeniable evidence of a specific wrongdoing. Perhaps you found texts proving infidelity, or bank statements showing theft. You lay it on the table, expecting a confession or an apology. Instead, they look at the evidence, then look at you and drop a verbal smoke bomb. Well, what about the time you forgot my birthday 3 years ago? What about how your mother talks to me? Suddenly, the spotlight swings violently away from their current crime and focuses on your past mistakes. This is whataboutism, a defensive tactic that rejects criticism by accusing the accuser of hypocrisy. It is the adult equivalent of the playground retort. I know you are, but what am I? The goal is not to defend their actions, but to invalidate your standing to judge them. By bringing up a completely unrelated grievance, often an old, resolved or minor issue, they create a false moral equivalence. They are saying, you are not perfect, therefore you have no right to hold me accountable. It is a deflection strategy designed to paralyze the conversation. Instead of addressing the immediate issue, their cheating, you are forced to defend your character against a resurrected ghost from the past. The conversation devolves into a scorecard comparison, a race to the bottom to see who is the worse person, ensuring that the original topic is buried under a landslide of mutual resentment. This tactic is devastating because it makes resolution impossible. Every time you try to address a problem, you are punished with a list of your own failures. You learn that bringing up a grievance will simply result in your own trial. Eventually, you stop speaking up. You swallow your hurt because you know that any attempt to hold them accountable will only lead to a reopening of your own wounds. It creates a stalemate of silence where they are free to act without consequence, protected by a shield made entirely of your imperfections. Discarding. It is the final brutal act of the play, where the objectification of the victim becomes undeniable. Discarding is not a breakup, it is a disposal. In a normal relationship, ending things is usually painful, but involves a degree of closure, mutual sadness, or at least an acknowledgement of the shared history. In this dynamic, however, the end comes with the terrifying indifference of someone taking out the trash. One day, you are their soulmate, and the next, you are a stranger they can't be bothered to look at. It happens the moment you are no longer useful to them. Perhaps you have run out of money, You are emotionally exhausted and can no longer provide supply, or most commonly, they have secured a fresh target who is shiny and new. The cruelty of the discard lies in its abruptness and its total lack of empathy. They do not mourn the relationship because for them, it was never a connection between equals. It was a transaction. You were a toaster that stopped toasting, so they bought a new one. They often move on with shocking speed, parading a new partner around days or even hours after leaving you. This is calculated to inflict maximum pain. They want you to see how easily you are replaced, reinforcing the message that you were never a person to them, just a function. This leaves you in a state of profound shock and trauma, often without any closure. You are left trying to solve the puzzle of how someone could go from "I love you" to "I don't know you" in the blink of an eye. You question everything that happened. Was any of it real? Did they ever care? The painful answer the discard provides is that while your love was real, their engagement was merely a performance. They leave you shattered and confused, while they walk away without a backward glance, completely unburdened by guilt, ready to restart the cycle with someone else. The martyr complex. It masquerades as the highest form of love, pure, unadulterated selflessness. But beneath the surface of their sacrifice lies a covert form of control that is suffocating. The martyr complex is a manipulation tactic where an individual deliberately suffers or overextends themselves to incite guilt and dependence in others. They are the person who loudly sighs while cleaning the kitchen, refusing your offer to help so they can later complain that they have to do everything around here. They are the parent who reminds you, in every argument, of the specific career opportunities they gave up to raise you. They do not give to support you, they give to indebt you. The dynamic is built on aggressive altruism. They weaponize their kindness. Every favor, every gift, and every act of service comes with an invisible, high-interest price tag attached. When you try to set a boundary or express a grievance, they immediately play the victim card. How can you treat me this way after I've worked my fingers to the bone for you? I have given up my entire life for your happiness, and this is the thanks I get. Suddenly, your legitimate feelings are crushed under the weight of their immense performative suffering. You are stripped of the right to be angry because, on paper, they are a saint, and you are the ungrateful villain who doesn't appreciate them. The ultimate goal of the martyr is to make themselves indispensable and above reproach. By constantly painting themselves as the long-suffering servant, they make you feel like a burden they are bravely carrying. This creates a paralyzing sense of obligation. You stay in the relationship or submit to their demands not because you want to, but because you are crushed by a debt you can never repay. You walk on eggshells, terrified of causing them more pain, unaware that their pain is a calculated performance designed to keep you on your knees, forever apologizing for your own existence. Infantilization. Don't worry your pretty little head about that. Let me handle the driving. You know how anxious you get. These phrases often arrive wrapped in the velvet cloak of protection, feeling at first like a relief, a partner stepping in to shoulder the burdens of the world for you. But this is not care. It is a cage. Infantilization is the strategic erosion of your competence and independence, a psychological regression forced upon you by someone who needs you to be weak so they can feel strong. This tactic operates by steadily stripping away your agency under the guise of benevolence. A partner might seize control of your finances, claiming you are bad with math, choose your clothes because you have no style, or speak for you in public because you are too shy. They micromanage your daily existence, constantly second-guessing your decisions and correcting your behavior as if they are the parent and you are a toddler. If you attempt to assert yourself, you are met with condescending amusement or faux concern. Are you sure you can handle that? Remember what happened last time. They weaponize your past mistakes to prove that you are incapable of navigating the world without their supervision. The eventual result of this dynamic is learned helplessness. When you are treated like a child for long enough, you start to believe you are one. You lose confidence in your ability to perform basic tasks, paying bills, making appointments, driving to new places, because you have been conditioned to believe you will fail. You stop trusting your own judgment and start looking to them for permission to exist. The manipulator succeeds in making themselves the indispensable architect of your reality, leaving you terrified of leaving not because you love them, but because they have convinced you that you are too fragile, too stupid, or too incompetent to survive in the real world on your own. Parentification. You are not sleeping next to an equal. You are sleeping next to a project. You find yourself constantly reminding a grown adult to pay their bills, to apologize when they are wrong, or even to perform basic hygiene. This is parentification within a relationship, a toxic inversion of roles where you are forced to become the responsible caregiver to a partner who refuses to grow up. It is not a partnership of two capable adults. It is a parasitic dynamic where one person functions as the parent, providing structure, money, emotional regulation, and safety, while the other acts as the child, demanding unconditional love, throwing tantrums, and taking no accountability. The manipulator weaponizes their own incompetence. They will look at you with wide, helpless eyes and say, "I just don't know how to do that," or "You're so much better at handling the stressful stuff." At first, it flatters your ego. You feel competent and needed. But soon, the trap snaps shut. By feigning helplessness, they offload all the boring, difficult, and heavy aspects of adult life onto your shoulders. If they forget an anniversary, it is because you didn't remind them. If they lose a job, it is because you didn't support them enough. They force you to manage their emotions, soothe their irrational fears, and clean up their messes, all while they contribute nothing but demands. The psychological toll is a profound loss of attraction and a crushing sense of loneliness. You cannot feel desire for someone you have to raise. You stop seeing them as a romantic partner and start seeing them as a dependent who cannot survive without you. This is exactly what they want. By making you their parent, they trap you with guilt. You feel you cannot leave because they are too fragile to make it on their own. You stay not out of passion, but out of a grim sense of duty, exhausted by the effort of living two lives, yours and theirs, simultaneously. Stashing. You have been dating for 6 months. You know the intimate details of their childhood. You sleep in their bed, and you are the first person they call when they get bad news. Yet, to the rest of the world, you do not exist. Stashing is the act of intentionally hiding a romantic partner from one's friends, family, and social media presence, effectively compartmentalizing them into a secret corner of one's life. You are a ghost. You are never tagged in photos. You are never invited to weddings or parties, and their parents have no idea you even breathe. The manipulator often disguises this secrecy as a virtue. They will say, "I just really value our privacy," or "My family is so toxic, I'm actually protecting you by keeping them away." It sounds noble, but it is a lie. Privacy is a mutual decision to keep intimate details sacred. Stashing is a unilateral decision to hide your existence. You notice that they are active online, tagging friends and posting selfies. But the moment you enter the frame, the camera goes away. You are good enough to sleep with, but you are not good enough to be seen with. The psychological impact is a deep, corrosive sense of shame. You begin to feel like a dirty secret or a placeholder. You wonder what is wrong with you, why you aren't presentable enough to be acknowledged. This is exactly where they want you. Insecure and grateful for the crumbs of time they give you in private. The strategic goal of stashing is usually to maintain the public illusion that they are single. By keeping you hidden, they keep their options open, allowing them to flirt with others or even pursue other relationships without the baggage of a known partner. They get the emotional and physical benefits of a relationship with you while retaining the social freedom of a bachelor, treating you not as a partner, but as a convenience stowed away in a drawer until they are ready to play. Scapegoating. The tension in the room is palpable. Something has gone wrong. A lost job, a broken plate, a ruined holiday. Logic dictates that accidents happen or that complex problems have complex causes. But in this narrative, the cause is singular, simple, and always the same. It is you. Scapegoating is the systematic practice of selecting one individual to bear the burden of an entire group's or partner's dysfunction. It is a psychological cleansing ritual where the manipulator dumps their own shame, failures, and aggression onto a designated target so they can remain pure and blameless. In a toxic family or relationship, the scapegoat serves essentially as the emotional trash can. If the manipulator is angry, it is because you provoked them. If the family is unhappy, it is because you are difficult and ruining the vibe. The manipulator projects their own negative traits onto you. They accuse you of being selfish when they are greedy, or accuse you of being angry when they are the ones screaming. By assigning you the role of the problem, they absolve themselves of the need to ever look in the mirror. You become the vessel for everything they refuse to accept about themselves. The tragedy of this dynamic is that the scapegoat is often the strongest or most perceptive person in the room. The one who sees the toxicity for what it is, which is exactly why they must be crushed. The impact is a profound, maddening isolation. You are effectively gang-stalked by the people who are supposed to love you. Over time, you internalize this projection, believing that you are inherently flawed, bad luck, or a burden. You walk through life carrying the heavy, invisible weight of sins you never committed, convinced that if you could just be better, the chaos around you would stop, never realizing that the chaos was never yours to begin with. Boundary testing. It rarely begins with a scream or a shove. Instead, it begins with a nudge. They show up 30 minutes late to a date without texting. They make a joke about an insecurity you explicitly told them was off limits. They accidentally read a text on your phone. This is boundary testing, a calculated series of reconnaissance missions designed to map the structural integrity of your self-respect. Like a predator tapping on the glass of a cage to see if it holds, the manipulator is probing your defenses to see exactly how much disrespect you will tolerate before you fight back. The danger lies in the subtlety. These violations are often small enough to possess plausible deniability. If you get angry about them being late, you look rigid. If you get upset about the joke, you are oversensitive. This puts you in a bind. Do you start a fight over something seemingly trivial? Or do you let it slide to keep the peace? The manipulator is counting on you choosing peace, but every time you let a small boundary slide, they silently register it as permission to push further. The line in the sand is erased, and a new one is drawn closer to your throat. The ultimate goal is conditioning. By slowly acclimatizing you to small indignities, they desensitize you to abuse. It is the classic boiling frog phenomenon. Today, they interrupt you. Next month, they yell at you. Next year, they silence you completely. By the time the major violation occurs, your reflex to say no has been dismantled because you have been trained to accept the unacceptable in manageable, bite-sized pieces. Comparison. Why can't you be more like her? My ex never had a problem with this. Look at how driven he is. He's already been promoted twice. It is the constant, corrosive whisper that you are essentially a draft version of a person, while someone else out there is the final masterpiece. Comparison is a manipulation tactic used to manufacture insecurity and competition. By holding you up against a third party, an ex-partner, a friend, a celebrity, or even a complete stranger, the manipulator systematically devalues you, stripping away your unique identity and reducing you to a set of deficiencies. This tactic turns your relationship into a gladiator arena where you are the only one fighting. They create a phantom rival, an idealized standard that you are doomed to fail against. If you are quiet, they praise someone who is outgoing. If you are outgoing, they admire someone who is mysterious and reserved. The goalpost is always moving because the point isn't to help you improve. The point is to keep you feeling inadequate. They want you to feel replaceable. By making you believe that there is a line of better options waiting outside the door, they ensure that you work twice as hard to keep your spot. The result is that you become obsessed with winning a game that is rigged against you. You change your hair, your clothes, your hobbies, and your personality, desperately trying to morph into the person they claim to admire. But it never works. The moment you match the rival, they switch the comparison to someone else. You are left exhausted, stripping away pieces of yourself to fit a mold that doesn't exist, while they sit back and enjoy the ego boost of having you fight for a validation they have no intention of giving. Covert intimidation. It is the violence of the near miss. It is the fist punching the wall right next to your head, leaving a dent in the plaster, but not on your skin. It is the reckless driving, speeding up to 90 miles per hour while you beg them to slow down, staring straight ahead with a stony expression. It is standing in the doorway, blocking your exit without saying a word. Covert intimidation is the art of implying danger without ever verbally uttering a threat. It is designed to instill a primal, physical fear in you while maintaining total plausible deniability. The power of this tactic lies in the unspoken "or else." They don't have to say, "I am going to hurt you." They simply have to show you that they could if they wanted to. They might aggressively clean a collection of knives while you are arguing. They might throw a plate across the room, smashing it against the wall, and then calmly say, "Look what you made me do." The message is received loud and clear. Next time, that could be you. Yet, if you call the police or tell a friend, the manipulator can shrug and say, "I never touched her. I just have a bad temper. Is it illegal to be angry?" This creates a terrifying atmosphere of walking on eggshells. Your body enters a permanent state of fight or flight. You stop arguing, you stop asking for things, and you make yourself physically smaller, all to avoid triggering the beast. You are controlled not by what they are doing, but by the terrifying potential of what they might do. They successfully dominate you through the loom of violence, achieving total submission without ever having to land a single blow, keeping their hands clean while your nerves are shattered. Shaming. It is a poison dart aimed directly at your self-worth. It transforms a simple mistake into a character flaw. A healthy partner might say, "I didn't like it when you did that." A shamer says, "I can't believe you are the kind of person who would do that. It's disgusting." Shaming is the manipulation tactic of weaponizing disgrace to force compliance. It operates by convincing you that you are fundamentally defective, improper, or unworthy of respect. The manipulator acts as the moral judge, jury, and executioner. They target your deepest insecurities, your body, your intelligence, your past, or your habits, and magnify them until you feel small and exposed. They might use slut-shaming to control how you dress, mocking you for looking cheap when you wear something they dislike. They might use intelligence shaming, rolling their eyes at your opinions and asking, "Did you really just say that out loud?" They often invoke an invisible audience to amplify the pressure. "Everyone was looking at you," or "My friends think it's embarrassing that you act like this." The goal is to hack your internal guidance system. By linking your autonomy to the feeling of shame, they train you to police yourself. You stop speaking up, you stop taking risks, and you stop being yourself, simply to avoid that burning sensation of humiliation. You begin to view yourself through their eyes, as someone who is flawed and lucky to be tolerated. The shamer doesn't need to control you with chains. They control you by making you feel so dirty that you don't believe you deserve to be free. Role-playing. All the world's a stage, and in this dynamic, you are merely a prop in their one-person show. Role-playing is a sophisticated manipulation tactic where an individual adopts a curated persona, a character, to extract a specific reaction, resource, or level of compliance from you. They do not present their authentic self. Instead, they present the version of themselves that is most likely to unlock your defenses. They are the chameleon who scans your psychological needs and morphs into exactly what you are missing. If you are lonely, they play the soulmate. If you are nurturing, they play the helpless victim. If you are insecure, they play the confident mentor. The danger of this tactic is that it forces you into a complementary script without your consent. If they cast themselves as the damsel in distress, you are psychologically conscripted into the role of the rescuer, forced to solve their problems to maintain the narrative. If they play the persecuted saint, you are cast as the protector against a cruel world. They trap you in a rigid dynamic where you cannot be yourself. You must constantly act in a way that validates their character. The relationship becomes a performance, and any attempt by you to break character, to show real emotion or demand real accountability, is met with confusion or rage because you have ruined the scene. The ultimate betrayal of role-playing is the inevitable mask slip. Since the persona is a fabrication, it cannot be sustained forever. Eventually, the saint becomes cruel, the hero becomes cowardly, or the rich tycoon asks to borrow money. When this happens, you are left with a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. You realize you fell in love with a mirage. You weren't dating a person, you were dating a projection. The manipulator doesn't mourn the loss of the connection. They simply change costumes and find a new audience member who hasn't yet seen the ending of the play. The nice guy contract. He is the one who listens to you complain about your ex for 3 hours. He brings you soup when you're sick. He drives you to the airport at 4 a.m. and says, "I'm not like other guys. I just want you to be happy." On the surface, it looks like sainthood, but beneath the benevolence lies a hidden, unilateral agreement that you never signed. The nice guy contract is a transactional form of manipulation, where an individual performs acts of kindness not out of genuine altruism, but as a down payment on a specific return, usually sex, romantic affection, or a relationship. This dynamic treats human connection like a vending machine. The manipulator believes that if they insert enough kindness coins, listening, buying dinner, doing favors, then intimacy is owed to them as a guaranteed payout. They view their friendship as a currency they are accumulating to eventually buy your love. Because this contract is covert, they never explicitly say, "I am doing this so you will sleep with me." You believe you are building a genuine friendship. You accept their kindness at face value, unaware that every favor is being tallied in a ledger you cannot see.